Hello, I'm Terry Martin. Good to have you with us. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has declared victory in Syria and announced a partial withdrawal of Russian troops. During a surprise visit to Syria, Putin said the task of fighting what he called, quote, armed bandits was now mostly complete. He said a significant part of the Russian forces could now return home, and he praised the Russian military for doing a spectacular job. Let's bring in DW's Julia Chapman in Moscow. So, Julia, President Putin on a whirlwind diplomatic tour there. Let's start with Syria. Has Russia really accomplished all it set out to achieve there?
Well, when Russia intervened in the Syrian conflict in 2015, it certainly changed the course of that conflict. At the time, President Putin said that the stated aim of Russian military intervention was to combat terror groups in the region. As time went on, as the 2.5 years went by, it became increasingly clear that one of his other priorities was also to bolster his ally, Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, and he's certainly gone some way to accomplishing that. There's been a marked shift in the balance of power in Syria since the Russians got involved with airstrikes which were intended to support Syrian ground troops as well as Iranian-backed Shia militias there. But there has been some progress on the terrorism front as well. Islamic State has lost a lot of the territory that it gained in Syria in 2014, including the strategic city of Raqqa. And Putin said yesterday in his speech that if Islamic State was to rear its head again, Russian troops would be ready to jump back in. And it's not the first time that Putin has made a withdrawal announcement. There have been at least 2 similar ones, neither of which resulted in any significant withdrawal of troops from the country. But there is certainly enough evidence to suggest that this time might be different because situations on the ground have changed.
Okay, so much for Syria. Putin's next stop on his trip is Egypt. Its relations with Moscow have been rocky in the past couple of years. Is Putin ready to patch things up there?
Well, it's certainly true that there's been a strain in relations between Egypt and Russia since the downing of a Russian passenger plane over the Sinai Peninsula 2 years ago. That resulted in the deaths of all 224 people on board, most of which were Russian tourists on their way back to St. Petersburg from holidays in Egypt. Egypt has historically been a very important tourist destination for Russians. It's been very popular with them, and therefore Russian tourists have been very important to Egypt's tourism economy. So they're very keen to see the return of Russian tourists to the region. It's often said that hoteliers and wait staff in Egypt speak better Russian than they do English, reflecting the picture of tourism there generally. But yesterday's meeting between President Putin and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi certainly suggested that improving relations was on the table. There was a nuclear deal signed between them to the tune of $21 billion US, and they did discuss the resumption of commercial flights between the 2 countries, which have been suspended since the incident over the Sinai 2 years ago, although no concrete date for the resumption of flights has been set yet.
Thanks, Julia. DW's Julia Chapman there in Moscow.